All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the World of Momos podcast. And on this segment of reflections and reactions, today we have Matthew Bond with us. First, we'll let Matthew introduce himself. Go ahead, Matthew, tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and all the jazz.
Thanks, Momus. Nice to be here. My name's Matthew Bond. I currently reside in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and I'm a English teacher by day and artist by rest of the day and evening. And I've been teaching for the last 5 years, and I've been making art all my life. And I do freelance artwork, and you can find me on Twitter. My handle's at drawn by Bond, and by the same website name, drawnbybond.com. So it's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, I'm looking forward to having a conversation.
All right, that's cool. And I will put all the links below, anyways, for people to check out Matthew's stuff, which is pretty cool, actually. I really like his art. As so today we are going to talk about which the title says, what is going on in Canada. So to sort of bring puts a bit of context before we talk about it. Currently, as it's been told in the news, mortgage growth in Canada hasn't been this weak since 2001. The Canadian Central Bank expects that the economy will avoid a recession. And last month's forecast growth of like 0.8% or something like that for both the third and fourth quarters might suggest that. However, Canada's economy depends a lot on exporting to United States as well. 75% of Canadian exports go to America. And Canada's GDP in August came in at 2.082, I think so, trillion dollars. Um, in August, and the previous month was only zero point zero 0.01 difference. So, is Canada in a recession? Probably seems like it. Two in five people say Canadians say that they have taken money from savings or other accounts that they generally try to avoid. I'm pretty sure for most of the people, it's even worse than just taking money from the savings. Is the inflation seems to be cooling at some point, but the cost of living crisis is not. Prices for just about everything are a lot higher than they were a couple of years ago, which seems to be the same for most countries, but in Canada it seems to be a bit worse. And while there has been a widespread progress to bring price growth to heel, many categories are still climbing, and the effects of those prices from last 2 years of it being expensive is also going to be felt now, even though the prices might go down relatively lower. Still, what people have spent before is going to have effect now. And culturally, as people know, the patriation of the Constitution in 1982, which was the process by which Canada became able to amend its own constitution without the agreement of the United Kingdom, included a new element, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It was Section 27 of which provided that this charter shall be interpreted in a manner consistent with the preservation and enhancement of the multicultural heritage of Canadians. So it sort of baked in multiculturalism into Canada. However, when we see a multiculturalism trying to play out in the francophile areas of Canada, like Quebec, it doesn't really work that way because people who are coming in from different cultures, they are generally speaking English and not really learning French. So the multicultural element within the francophile areas cannot be maintained within the that sort of culture. And then we also saw the introduction of the bill C-16, which had a lot of negative effects on the freedom of speech in Canada. And obviously, the draconian laws and actions of the government against its own people during COVID. Everyone knows about that, and the freedom movement of the truckers as well. So, encompassing all of that crap that has Canada has gone through and going on, what we want to talk about is what is what has been the change in Canada culturally. over 3 years, probably a little bit before the pandemic and during the pandemic, and now after the effects? Has there been a cultural change? And then what has been the cultural change since 7th of October, when Hamas attacked Israel? What yeah, just talk to us about that.
Okay, interesting questions, definitely. So, on the ground level, from my experience, what I've seen in my particular city, I'm in the east end of the GTA, and there's been a massive influx of Middle Eastern immigrants, um, which is, it's interesting. It plays
Is
in
that
line with
recent?
absolutely, absolutely. I have never seen such a mass, um, like I said, influx of Middle Eastern immigrants in my particular city, but also in the core of the GTA in downtown Toronto. Because I travel downtown with friends and for business, and yeah, I've just seen a huge change in the demographic. And it's interesting because I feel that this plays in line with the government's impetus to have foreign students come in, um, you know, make the most of the educational system. But there's something going on that doesn't quite make much sense, and that ties directly in line with the housing situation. So we've got thousands and thousands of students. I lived in Brampton for a while. It's just on the outskirts of the GTA to the west, and it's a heavy Indian demographic in that region. And I've seen numerous videos, and I live there, so I can vouch for this. They'll have a job offering, and there'll be lineups for blocks of just um, these students looking for work, looking for places to live. If you walk down a residential neighborhood, not necessarily in a lesser off area either, you'll see maybe 5 or 6 cars in the driveway, and this is because the landlords are renting out 5 or 6 rooms in their home to people trying to survive. So yeah, it's interesting the way things have changed, and this really did begin, I'd say, around 2017, 2018, just before the pandemic struck and the lockdowns occurred, and now it's just ever increasing. In actually, it's interesting. I have lots of Indian friends. I've in the early '90s, I grew up. My first friend on my street was an Indian boy and a Chinese boy, and it's fascinating how that's kind of foretold, like how the demographic would shift in this country. So I've always gone along with people of all ethnicities, I think, and as we'll touch later on, just the value that immigration can bring to any country, at its best.
Don't
But
don't don't try to hide your racism, Matthew. It's fine.
no, no, it's honestly like 90% of my friends aren't white, which is actually interesting. So yeah, it's you kind of I'd say I got lucky growing up amongst people of different ethnicities. Like it's really just like yeah. Anyways, that's
Yeah, like multiculturalism, I see it as it depends on the region, it depends on the country, right? So I don't think so it works in Britain as such,
okay.
and that's me saying as someone who has immigrated from other country into Britain and become British, that
Sure.
me bringing a culture from outside is fine, but me bring a culture from outside and then having it be the national culture is not fine. Like impacting that much on it is not fine,
Right, right.
because Britain has such a continuity, a historical continuity, right? So that needs to be kept for it to be alive. In America, multiculturalism works in a lot of ways because it is sort of like a country of immigrants. So
Mhm.
people are bringing in their culture and stuff, and it's that sort of works in Canada as well because it is an offshoot of America in terms of the new world, the finding of the new world and stuff. But multiculturalism works in good times, right? So it's sort of
Sure,
like
sure.
you go to a carnival, you're having a good time, there are different things, and you're enjoying, oh yeah, different foods from different world, and like you're enjoying all of that. Oh, you're from there, you speak that language, you're having a good time. So what people, I think so, what happens with people, they get stuck in that carnival mode. They think
Yes.
the life is that carnival, right? But
Correct.
when a hardship falls in, that's when you see the negative effects of multiculturalism that hasn't been encapsulated by a strong national culture, right? So
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
yeah, so like see if you can find the parallels for it, right? So during 9/11, when 9/11 happened in America, the American like had a lot of multiculturalism going on, and it always has. But they all pulled together. They had a sense, and this I'm saying this recent, not from before, but recent in what most people would have experienced in their lifetime. Unless you're very young and you shouldn't be watching that then. But you know, Americans pulled together. So there was multiculturalism, but there was an overriding Americanness, and then they pulled together. But they because there was talk about national culture being more important, and then you welcoming other cultures. So, but now that the 7th of October event has happened, and we don't see America pulling together in the same way. No, we can say like it didn't happen to them. Yeah,
Right.
it's fine. It didn't happen to them, but it did happen to one of the Western countries, one of the pivotal in my view, Western countries, which is at the forefront of fighting within ideology, which is against the entirety of the West, right? So they are pivotal in that sense. But what has happened during the COVID and everything like that, people have completely disintegrated. And
Mhm.
that is because of the negative effects of, I think, so multiculturalism. Because if you're having multiculturalism from for people who are also of liberal democracies or uphold liberal democracies to be good, like you will have Indians, you will have Chinese coming in who did not like their uh, communism, and that's why they come to respect liberal democracy, right? That sort of mix when it's coming through is fine, but when you have like people from Middle East, people from other Islamic countries coming in, very fresh right now, right, who have a very negative view of the West, they don't respect the liberal democracy, we can't really be expected to appreciate their culture, right? You can't. So that's why I think it's a problem. But since you guys have it in your constitution, you guys seem to be screwed over it. But have you seen that affect like your communication with or your friendships with people who you grew up with, and then your interactions with other immigrants who are just coming now from these Islamic countries? Have you had any interaction? Do you feel there's a stark like, am I making some sort of sense?
It does make sense what you're saying. Interestingly enough, most of my friends that, like I'd mentioned, aren't Caucasian. They're either Chinese or black. So I don't have too many Middle Eastern or Indian friends. I do speak with some Indian people, and oddly enough, this one fellow I'd spoken with, he says, as he'd said, his friends have told him there are just simply too many Indians, and I think it's fascinating to
Yeah.
hear that from an Indian man himself. But um, he's I'd say he's fully integrated. He doesn't allow his religious views to supersede his sense of community or place in the city, you could say.
Mm,
Um, and I was going to mention that, yeah, can okay. So an interesting term I learned way back in grade school: the melting pot society versus the mixed salad type of society. America is more of a melting pot because the cultures become assimilated within the demographic. You can practice your religion, your political leaning, but you're kind of within that scope of the American way of life.
yeah.
Here in Canada,
Pursuit
it's
of happiness sort of
yeah,
thing.
well, truly, truly. In Canada, it's completely a mixed salad, and it's only been exacerbated in the last 4 years, I'd say,
Mm.
especially now with these global conflicts that are erupting. Um,
That's the thing. The
and,
carnival has stopped. So,
yeah, true. That's it. Precisely. Yeah, it's good metaphor there. The the mixed salad aspect in Toronto has always been evident and apparent, especially with the kind of like it's segregation in a wholesome way because you'd have certain towns, certain streets, like this would be Cabbage Town, Chinatown, Greek Town,
mm,
and it just works so beautifully. It was so, and it still does. It still does. You walk down Chinatown, and I've actually been to China. Just walking down the streets, it looks and it smells like China. It's really
mm,
fascinating. And then you go to Greek Town, you can get a taste of the cuisine and the atmosphere, and just that cultural, that eclectic mix of cultures, not clashing, but kind of coexisting in
Coexisting. Yeah.
harmony. It's a beautiful thing. It really, and that's kind of where I'm, in the vision of my mind of how immigration works at its peak. This is
Yeah.
precisely it.
But
But again, like you're saying, we're seeing now,
yeah,
yeah,
because
people have just taken to their,
yeah, because what happens is we are celebrating China and everything, right? Like in that sense that you go to Chinatown, the Chinese over there, and you get that feeling of their culture and stuff. They are coexisting. There's no problems, right? But what if Canada goes to war with China? Right? So this is the
yeah,
problem that I have with multiculturalism. Like it works, but if you have an imbalance of certain cultures, you don't have a proper mix, you don't keep an eye on immigration, you get too many people in for one culture, and also when you get people of competing culture, right? So when you have Muslims coming in, and coming in, and you're not vetting them, and they're coming in from problematic Islamic countries,
yeah.
is going to have an adverse impact on the Hindu population and
Mm-hmm.
the Jewish population of that area, because they have always been prejudiced
Oh yeah,
against them.
yeah, yeah.
So they're going to have that effect,
Certainly.
right? What if what if Canada has to, not like Canada is going to war with anyone apart from itself, but what if Canada has to go to war with any of the Islamic countries? This is the question that I keep on asking about Britain, because Britain is more in a position to go to war with that, but Canada as an ally would be helping, right? So what are these people? Where are their allegiances? Then they don't
We know.
seem to be like with Britain, like
Hmm.
for these people who have
Yeah.
recently come in, at least the first generation immigrants. It doesn't seem to be like with Britain and Canada. So they become a liability.
Hmm.
And then that creates hostility and
Yeah.
stuff. But that also, even within that carnival mode, but people seem to be afraid to say that, immigration actually caused um, pressures on a nation's services, right? So the housing services,
Yeah.
the medical services, which is in Britain and Canada is a bit similar because we have national health system, right? So how can we keep on having that good quality of free to the point of delivery healthcare if we just keep on adding more people to the system?
Right.
Then we keep on adding people from different countries who don't understand the base culture of that area. So the healthcare that they're providing is just an objective healthcare, right? So the,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
subjective part of the healthcare of taking care of the elderly and stuff, understanding the
Hmm.
culture, that goes downhill,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So but what are the so because you live in a city, around a city, and in a city, what has been the impacts of the people within Canada? Like how are people like faring? Because you're self-employed as well to the most extent, so
Hmm.
how does it look for you?
Well, that's a very all-encompassing type of question. It's interesting because I've had, like I said, I'm on the ground floor and I'm in the trenches and I have some solid anecdotal experience I can relay here. For example, the healthcare system, we know it is at its capacity beyond anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. And here's a good example: a friend of mine, Indian friend of mine, is training to become a dental hygienist assistant, I
Hmm.
believe, assistant. So he invited me to come to his school, and they do teeth cleaning and that for training.
Hmm.
And I went there to get the checkup, but I couldn't complete the training for him because I needed a doctor's signature for his liability purposes.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'll go. I don't have a family doctor currently. I make a point to keep myself in as best
Hmm.
health as possible, so I don't have to deal with that because the system is just total chaos right now. And I do have other friends that are working in the field, and they just say it's madness. But so I went to my local walk-in clinic to simply get this signature, and I know for a fact I could have done this no problem 5, 6 years ago. So I walked into the clinic, and it was completely. There were about 40 people just in there, children, elderly people. It was completely full. It's the middle of the day. And I went to the receptionist and asked if I could set up an appointment, get a signature. I want to get it's for getting a dental
Yeah.
checkup. She said, we don't do that. No doctor in here is going to just sign it off on you. They need you to be a client with, or be a patient with the doctor. And that's like
Mm.
a whole process. And they're not
Yeah.
taking any new
Registered with
patients.
that clinic
So
and.
right off the bat, I couldn't get a simple teeth cleaning
Mm.
without, with someone training, not even an actual dentist, because the doctor was at such peak capacity. I wasn't even able to be taken on or even considered to be a patient. And they didn't even ask me my health condition. So like, that's just one clear example of how overloaded the system is. And another story, you keep hearing people are calling for ambulances. They're waiting 10 minutes. There's no one picking up the phone. And this is in Toronto. I'm speaking for Toronto.
10 minutes
Toronto, and
is a short time for here, to be
it's a
honest.
short time, but
Like, no, no,
10
no.
minutes.
Like, just imagine
Oh,
that. It's
right, right.
changing,
Yeah.
right?
No, no.
I mean, I think so. Those troubles are a bit similar over here as well in
Okay.
England,
Yeah.
but even more exasperated. Like, just imagine the place that I live, right? It's a town. It's a small town of 64,000 people. So 64,000 people is a
It's a
lot of
fair
people,
number.
right? We only
Yeah.
have two GP surgeries, so just two clinics,
Right.
right? Two
Right.
clinics in this area and two, like, so sort of like three, four clinics, but they're divided into sections of that. That's not enough. That's
Hmm.
not enough for anyone to get. You're asked to call at 8 o'clock to get an appointment, right?
Yeah.
Like you call at 8 o'clock, no one is picking up because it's already on busy. You're
Yeah.
waiting, you're
Yeah.
waiting, you're waiting, right? So you don't really get to that point
Hmm.
of actually having an appointment, and you're paying every month for
Oh
it.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, but like the national health is good as long as you have a sort of a limit on the people that you're getting into your country, and
Yeah. Yeah.
also increasing your capacity within your health system, like, making it good. But how
For
is
sure.
it like, how are the renting and the buying going on in Canada?
Yeah, that's a massive question and an important question. It's as bad as you think and definitely worse. The numbers that they project aren't nearly accurate. For example, prior to COVID happening, I was actually looking to rent a place to live because I ended a relationship and I'd moved out of Brampton back to Toronto, and I was looking for a new place to live. So that was an adventure. I'd gone to maybe six different locations across the city. As a prospective renter, I had a perfect credit score, enough to cover the rent for multiple months up front, and no dice. Nobody was, the competition just to rent is obscene. And that was before this situation has just exploded. Rental prices were actually pretty fair. You could rent you could rent a bedroom or a studio for around 1,000, a bedroom for about 700, a studio for 1,000, and anything else would be, upwards of 2,000 for multiple bedroom. But now you're looking at upwards of 2,000 for a studio, just to put the numbers in perspective. And a studio is no bigger than 400 square feet. I think it caps at like 400, 450 max. It's about the size of a master bedroom.
Mm,
So, and even getting that, there's simply nothing available. There's nothing available. If you go on any of the rental websites for the city, you'll see that whatever is available, they're charging whatever they want.
yeah,
Because
but
so far as I've learned,
is that due to too many people, or is that due to too many people and not building enough houses as well on top of that, or it's
it's
just
yeah,
like, yeah.
it's all of that. It's all of that. It's also the fact that there are so many people, so the demand is higher. Also, the fact there are plenty of places that are available but vacant because the prices are so
But do you know what the
exorbitantly high.
current mortgage rate is as well? Like, because that would be another thing, right? The cost to the landlords gone up.
Yeah, that's another factor. There's so many factors. I like that you're
Mm,
asking these questions because it all comes into play. It's all the landlords are affected, the renters are affected when the landlords raise the rent to try and meet their mortgage costs per month. So I have learned from people in my close circle that when they're so let's say the rate was at maybe 3%, it's going to be renewed at maybe upwards of 5 or 6%. So they're going to be paying almost 50%
yeah,
more than
it's
they
too
have
much.
already. It's too much. And that's why people are renting out literal, you know, 4 or 5 people in a room to simply meet the cost,
Yeah,
that monthly fee,
no,
because
that makes
there's
sense.
no other way.
I
They're
mean,
either going to
like,
lose. Yeah.
a friend of mine, a really close friend of mine, they're like renewing their mortgage recently, three-bed house. It's not a city or anything. It's out like, in my county. It's a town, and he will have to pay 700 pounds extra per month than what he's paying. How like I just don't understand like how are they expecting people to go on with
This
such.
is yeah, it's fascinating, man. The things that I'm learning and just learning kind of like on that like ground level, like all these little things that they don't talk about. But for example, if you go to the bank, like people are going into debt to make these payments.
Mm,
They're
mm,
saying they're going into their savings. Maybe the middle to upper middle class are
yeah,
dipping into their
that's
savings,
what I
but
was saying. Yeah.
everybody else is using credit.
And
And
what they've done to people over COVID, like, because Canada went, like, you guys went mental because you were still doing masking and stuff like that.
oh,
And what you
long
did
after.
to the truckers and whatnot. What's happening with that? What happened to the Freedom Truckers?
They're in court currently. They're going through trials. The people that were involved, Tamara Litch, the head organizer, she's still. I think she's making progress though, from what I've heard. I'm not following that
What is
closely
like
enough,
the
but
people's feeling, like normal, ordinary people's feeling within Toronto and area? Like, are they still connected to that? You know?
you know what? Honestly, it really woke a lot of people, like woke a lot of people up in the sense that they wondered, like, okay, there's a resistance happening here. Why is this happening?
Hmm.
It kind of got them thinking about, should I start paying attention to potential government corruption? Why is this even happening? Why is this a thing? It pertains also to getting the vaccines. People are wondering, did I really need to get these vaccines? A lot of these people, like 6 million people, they say didn't get them. I think the number's vastly higher. I'd argue it's
How many
possible.
didn't get the third and fourth and
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, let alone the first one. Yeah, the third, fourth, and they're
Yeah.
still pushing the latest one. So that's a lot of people are refusing. I think they're saying
Yeah.
on the news it's less than 5% uptake for the
Because you
latest one.
guys are like pretty polite. So are you seeing that change? Like that this is not about social politeness. This is about, being screwed over and not wanting that. Because there is still a sense
Oh,
of people don't understand. Like Canadians are still like pretty freedom loving. You guys have expansive like lands and stuff. It's not
yeah,
like your politeness is not to be taken for compliance.
right. Yeah, the tension is definitely high. And it's interesting. I think people that have been here for at least two generations, um, so my parents' generation, myself, we kind of have this. We grew up with the standard and expectations. You could write it off as entitlement, but this is the way life has been for us for decades, and it's
Mm,
all of a sudden shifting. And it almost, I know, maybe this is just me thinking this way, but it would make sense if the government is trying to shift its entire political leaning in a particular way. It's got a particular agenda in play. Why not flood the country with just a whole new people
yeah.
to implement your new ways of living, and nobody's going to bat
Yeah.
an eye to it because
See,
it's
that
just
that is the feeling that most people in most of the Western countries are having. That is a feeling that me as an immigrant has felt as well. It's like, oh, well, this is not what I came here for. Right. So I'm feeling that after 13 years of being in Britain, I'm feeling that betrayal coming in as well. It's like, no, no, this is not what you sold me. You sold me I'm coming in here for British culture, for Britain, right?
yeah,
Now you're saying like the culture that I went away from is better than over here. And that
oh yeah,
is sort of like, no, I want my money back. So like,
yeah, oh yeah, oh
no,
yeah, for
this is
sure,
not what you sold me. So
yeah, yeah.
so what is like what are why then why do people keep on voting for this idiot? what
Well,
is what is
this is
it?
the that's the question. It makes you wonder:
Because
Are they just
he's been there for so long now.
yeah?
Obviously now he's not going to be there, but
Mhm.
like he had been there for so long. It's not just him, it's the seats that he has implemented with other people as well because of him staying over there. What is it? Why can't you guys vote for your own benefit?
I think that'll be really telling in the next election. It's baffling. It makes me think the vote doesn't matter. I don't know. Is he was he installed? Have they kept him there? I really it makes you wonder. It makes
Yeah.
you wonder. It really feels like there's an agenda at play. All these new taxes are being implemented, introduced. They're simply just draining the wealth from the classes that have the money to spend. They're doing it reluctantly. They don't want to spend. I saw a clip recently. A trucker had shown his tax receipt. They taxed him on certain utilities, fuel,
Hmm.
and then they tax the tax. So they're
Hmm.
deliberately extracting wealth
Yeah.
for literally no reason.
Yeah.
We know the country's in a severe deficit, and they're trying to recoup the loss by one strategy, like I said earlier, was getting students in because students are charged 3 times the tuition price. That was a well-known fact, at least prior to 2020. So they're reaping huge amounts of money through the educational sector. Um, it's really bizarre what they're doing, and it seems very reckless,
But
very,
is
very
there is
reckless.
there a sense of, because I think the Canadians have just woken up really late, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and it's gone too far. But is there a sense of in people that they are going to fight for Canada, or is it that most people are just leaving?
You know, I yeah, that's most. If you talk to most Caucasian Canadians are just
Hmm.
ready to either move to the country, which I know a lot have, just to get away from the cities, the chaos of the cities,
Hmm.
or simply just leaving the country. That's a common strategy that I have become familiar with. I've seen a lot of people, I've spoken to people that have
Hmm.
done exactly that.
But if they leave, then it's going to be what he wants, the Canada.
Precisely. I think that is the strategy, truly. I really do. The dollar here doesn't go nearly as far as it did 5 years ago.
Hmm.
The cost of food is 50% higher. It everything's just extremely expensive. That's a conversation unto itself. Um,
So one thing that has like really bothered me is this is mainly only happened in Canada. I don't know if it's happening or not, but I've seen some advertisements for it, and there surely seems to be some movement around it, and it has been infecting other areas of the West as well. Is this if you're having a mental breakdown, just end your life campaign, right? Done by a health experts. What what the hell is going on with that? First of all, is that actually just something that they're planning to do, or is that in action? And also, what is the general public's reaction of the Canadians and the how much do immigrants know about this as well? Like, because they would be coming from different cultures where this is just bizarre.
I'd say it's more than just bizarre for them. I'd say it's sacrilegious, if anything, blasphemous at the very least. I say it's blasphemous, and not even religiously fundamental with my my leanings, but it's a very real thing. It's very real, and it was introduced actually prior to COVID happening. The
Oh,
pandemic, the lock, yeah, it was introduced prior, and the numbers that they tell you, the the numbers of people that are using it yearly are increasing.
so people are actually okay. Wait, this has
Oh,
actually gone on.
oh, it's going on. We're talking upwards of, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, last year alone was there were 13,000 people who
No
utilized
way.
the program. Oh yeah, oh
So
yeah,
13,000 people ended their life.
ended their lives through that program.
Now, do we know the demographics of those people?
That's something I'd have to look into. I've read the
Because
stats. Yeah, the stats are available. It's scary. It's
well,
since it's
it
since
will
it
have
started.
to be Canadians
Oh,
because it can't be
likely.
non-Canadians. I am I'm hesitant to say it, but I have a feeling it's more mainly white Canadians.
I believe so. I believe so.
That feeds into something
Yeah. I
that I
mean,
don't like going into conspiracies and stuff like
I know.
that, but
I
it
know.
feeds into something which is very pernicious that might not be the intent of it, but it is the result of it. Right?
Well, it
This
seems,
this is
yeah,
weird. This
yeah.
is
It,
so
it it
weird.
seems like they're trying to, you know, push aside one demographic while ushering in another to reshape the country. I mean, any observer looking at what's going on, we see it happening. Based on our conversation alone, let's not even go into the conspiratorial
Yeah.
realm. I can just see what's happening. The shift is happening in the one of the biggest cities in the country, the capital city of the province. This is what's happening. And yeah. Well, sort of going back to this MAID program, I'd watched a couple interviews with. I mean, this is someone speaking about their experience. A man who suffered a serious disability, paying. Yeah, he was in his 50s or 60s, paying his taxes all his life. He was self-employed, making great money, and they were in this interview. He was crying during this interview. He was saying that they were trying to sell him maids like almost, this is my interpretation, like a car salesman would try to sell you a car. They're
What
pushing
is
him in
maids like?
the just let me look up the acronym here.
Is that some sort of a service for ending your life or something?
If
Uh,
that's the service. Medical assistance in dying is the what the
murder,
acronym stands for.
murder,
Yeah.
state
And
sponsored murder.
but
Yeah.
that situation isn't even the cherry on the icing. It's there's another incident where someone was having difficulty paying their rent because
Oh, come on.
the landlord was going to boot them out because they were selling the property, and this person's social insurance wasn't enough to cover them for any of the locations, obviously with the situation. So they said they'd rather die than be on the street because that was the only other option for them.
Now,
Or
did that
so they
person die?
felt.
Did that like
I don't know what the story was with that. I don't know if they'd followed up with that person, but that was where it was with that. And
this is
it's
so
really
dangerous?
the case. There's no, like, it's either you're going to be on the street. Certain people, they're kind of in that situation where they're in old age. They don't have, like, starting a career makes zero sense. The government's not willing to help them out financially to survive. So it's horrendous.
It's so like I don't even want to go to that argument of it's a personal life, like they decide to end it.
Sure.
That's not the problem here, right? The problem is that you're creating conditions where a person ending their life becomes easier and acceptable, and
Yes.
and
Yes.
so that you hide the fact that you are failing the population,
Oh yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
Because so that you can hide the fact that, oh, why do you have to suffer as an old person? Not that I have to provide, as a government have to provide you more services. Why don't you just kill yourself, right?
It really is.
In
It's
so
yeah.
many different circumstances, I just, this is so evil.
Mhm.
And in the truest sense of evil, because it comes as disguise, is the devil's work, right? It comes
Yep.
disguised as something good.
Yep.
So it is the most evil of the evil things. And
Truly is. Yep.
I
Yep.
mean, let's say like that conspiracy, because the problem I have with conspiracies is they sort of hide the true intentions, because they oversimplify what is actually
Yes.
going on, right?
True.
So
True.
and that, in that way, we can't solve the problems properly. I have a feeling this is like one of those ideas that people have about this extinction rebellion and so on and so on, that there's too many people, right? So there has
Mhm.
been so many popular people that have been popularizing this idea that there's too many human beings, right?
Right.
So this has been done by people who subconsciously think that, might not say it out loud because they're afraid of their own thoughts, you
Mhm.
know, that I want to kill human beings. I wish there was more war so there would be less
Right.
human beings, sort of like that sort of,
Of
mentality.
course. Of course.
And then they have come to the conclusion, and that's how they have convinced themselves that this is a good idea, because in their subconscious that is running, that there's too many people. So they're thinking, oh, if they want to do it, oh, it's their fault. So they just shifted their mentality towards that. So it might not be a master making these plans, having a puppets around. It's like, oh, we're gonna reduce the white Canadian population or a certain population and stuff. But the effects of it would be people feeling that. So that feeling
Yes.
would be real, but there might not be a puppet master doing
Hmm.
this,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. It's kind
It
of,
just,
yeah, I know
yeah,
what you mean. Yeah.
it just might be like subconscious mentality of people
Yeah.
of a certain type. So I'm saying that because that, if that is the case, then I'm pretty sure that is the case. Then it's easier to deal with that in that way, that the way that you vote becomes even more
Yes.
important.
Oh, absolutely. Clearly. Yeah. I do lean in your direction with that. Certainly. Something this blatantly evil couldn't be so blatantly constructed. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, people
And
are too
actually,
stupid to construct that
oh,
anyway.
of
So
course, of course. Something else to add to that. They're discussing. I think they're leaning towards implementing the maid service available to people that have mental illness. So people that are merely depressed would be able to utilize it, which is, now you're starting to wonder. A lot of people are on medication
yeah,
for mental illness and especially depression. So it
but
kind of
now
makes
you
you wonder
also
what's
think they're trying to cover up as well, like
that
subconsciously
too.
again, like,
Sure.
oh, we have failed the whole society on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
case of pandemics and all the things that we have done. So what can we do? Like,
It's a
This is
band-aid
a part
solution.
of misplaced compassion, misplaced
Yeah.
sympathy, like, going really overboard. But that becomes sort of like important for people to realize that this is a point of, in the whole of West, I think that there's a point of conservation. There's a point of conservatives to come back into the fold. There's a point of the liberal part of the West to take a step back, right? So I think so. Even though I am classically liberal to the most extent, but I think so. Liberals have their failings, and this is their failing when they don't know when to stop, right? So you need a conservation of whatever we used to have to say no, that was good. Let's keep that, and where we are heading is bad, and that's
Yeah.
why I think so. All of the Western countries need to realize that en masse and probably vote as much conservative as they can, because we need to save our society. This
We need
is,
balance.
yeah,
Definitely balance. Yeah, it's
yeah,
getting out of
yeah.
control.
I think so. This is the proper existential crisis, right? Because what in history, what happens with republics, right? So the republics or the empires are stuff, but we don't have empires. We have republics right now. They usually end when or they start crumbling down when the basis of why they were republic, their origin story gets starts getting messed up, right? So, or the rules that they laid down at the start, they start getting messed up. The introduction of bill C-16 was one of those things for Canada, right? So that's why Canada started free falling. I
Yep.
think so, because of
Yep.
the people who came in with that thought and then they implemented that thought, and that
Yep.
goes against the founding foundations of Canada as a whole. What happened? So that's why Trudeau is a personality that is an existential has been an existential crisis for Canada. So you're going to have disruption, and that I see, like, that is how from the core, like a republic starts falling down, or even an empire starts falling, or a kingdom like Britain starts falling down, when you start saying that, you know this story that they have been trying to say, like the black people were always there in Britain. You're changing some narratives. Oh, this is a country of immigrants. No, it's not. Like, you're changing the narrative of the every British person was a racist. Oh, Churchill was a racist. Churchill was an enemy. Like,
Yep.
these you're breaking the foundation stories that Britain has been
Yes.
building on. And I think so that could be not even orchestrated, but an idea seeped in
Hmm.
to the rest of the populace, which I think so there is some legitimacy to that conspiracy, that these have clearly come from China, they have come from Russia,
Yeah.
these things and why wouldn't you, right?
Certainly. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I
It-
believe
it-
that.
yeah, exactly. If we were Chinese and we were in the Chinese government or something like that, we would be doing something like that as well,
And
and
it's
we
easy to
wanted,
do. It's easy
yeah,
to do it.
yeah,
Like really easy.
so easy because people are so dumb now, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Easily influenced, easily manipulated. A lot of the
and
youth are, yeah. Yeah. Well,
so,
social
but
media is the way.
overall, what is the feeling in Canada? Like, do you guys think, when is your next elections?
Let me confirm that for you. Let
Is it in a year or so, or
me check here.
what is the feeling in Canada, as in, there's
October
something
20th, 2025. So a couple years away.
2025, so
Year and a half
there
away.
is a lot of time left.
There is
Is
too
there
much
a
time.
feeling that, because there is a lot of feeling of despair in all of West, and people are leaving the project, so to speak,
Hmm.
you know Canada is probably more dependent on other countries. Um,
Oh, it is.
because it's not as if you guys have your own, like, military, or like you're not capable
Oh,
of,
that's another story. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
you are dependent in that way, like having that, friends around you,
Hmm.
sort of thing. You can't do it alone. America can do it alone. I think so. Britain has screwed itself over in a way as well, that it could do it alone, but it will involve a lot of suffering before it understands that it can do it alone, but it can eventually Britain can do it alone. But you wouldn't also want to lose Canada out of the Western sphere because a scalp for the enemy is a scalp nonetheless, no matter how important, how like it is.
Yeah.
But is there more despair in Canada? Do people feel like what they did even with the Canadian truckers and stuff like was it worth it? Is it just better if they just go to America? It's so much easier just immigrate over there. Is there a brain drain going on? Is there like okay, maybe I go away and then I come back in 10, 20 years when it's fixed like you know
I think it was actually a really powerful morale booster, to say the least. It showed people that, yeah, people, just the fact that people congregated together with these shared ideas and shared values really kind of rallied up that conservative Canadian type of mentality, that old school, the values and what Canada, inclusion and true freedom, the
Mm,
freedom to decide what goes into your body. I mean, it doesn't get more blatant than that.
yeah.
I think it was an important um, protest and demonstration that occurred. People look down on that, but I question, it was such a, such an iffy topic, touchy topic, the whole situation around COVID. But I mean, subj threatening someone's livelihood because they don't take an injection of any kind for anything is completely absurd. I was bewildered when
But the way
you
that
know,
your government handled it as well, like so heavy-handed.
it
I
was
don't know if
extreme,
that's
man.
something that you guys have learned from the French, but I don't understand like why was it the brutality of the police was a bit too much.
It was out
And
of
the
control, man.
perniciousness of
Yeah,
like when the truckers were happening as well, like cutting off their this like petrol or whatever the
freezing their
gas and
bank
stuff.
accounts,
Yeah,
freezing their
freezing the
bank
bank
accounts.
accounts. This I don't think so any other country has gone that far.
No, for some reason, the government in this country, or they've really pushed as far as they could before I'm sure the lawsuits started erupting. There's a lot of that going on behind the scenes that is never discussed on the mainstream media, but a lot of people have taken these situations on an individual basis to court, and they're not losing. They're not losing. For example, in the Canadian military, they forced injected, and they lost upwards of half of their troops because
Really,
they said no, and they just walked away. They're currently in a deficit of 10,000 ground forces.
no
Like,
way.
it's out of control. They are in dire need of revitalizing the military. So, not to digress here, but I'd read recently that the soldiers in the army are in the Canadian Army armed forces are not being paid properly, so they're going into their own debt to feed themselves, and they're having to purchase their own equipment. It's I don't know what's going on in this country, but
But
it
this
it
is
is
this
across
is
the
why
board.
I fear for Canada because being in the military is not like a job that you can go in and out of, right? So it's not as if
No.
like, oh, I'm not gonna be a soldier for a while, and then when the situation gets better, I'm gonna go back in. No, it takes a lot for a person to have that mentality to be a soldier first.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
if they get out of it, right, so they have to go through a whole process to make themselves get out of that brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever, like of that group, like
It's a
they
fact.
can't go back
Yeah.
and forth. Those 10,000 are
No.
lost.
I remember
90% of them are lost. They're not coming back.
10 years ago to sign up initially. I was interested in just learning about these things. 10 years ago, the sign up was 5 years minimum. You had to sign up and you'd be in the
Yeah.
army for 5 years. Now, this was about 5 years ago. I walked into a recruiting office just to have a conversation, and now it's 10 years minimum. It might even
Mm.
be more now because they need to retain,
Yeah.
unless you want to be dishonorably discharged, which,
Yeah.
that's a stamp on your
Yeah.
reputation. But yeah, it's brutal. Actually, one more thing I want to point out about how persistent they were in trying to get people to take the shots. I was getting phone calls with recorded messages from the city's mayor, and that happened about a dozen times. It,
Oh
it was it
God.
was like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
That was too much, man.
But
That really
what is going on now with what's happened with a October 7th? Because I've like seen a lot of Canadian Jews who are not feeling safe at all in
Mhm.
Canada. I mean, but also that is not just constricted to the Jews. Like, it's sort of like a marker for other people as well, other people who are in a lot of soft jobs as well, to see, um, because they're using their soft skills and social skills and stuff like that, and they're in those social jobs which are more affected by these things. They're not out of that sphere. They're not self-employed and stuff. They're connected to it.
Yeah.
So them supporting the Jews as well would start, they can see that this has started something else. So
Oh, I'm
what is
sure.
the feeling with that? Like, what are the actual Canadians feeling about, what is happening?
It's fascinating. You'd think that the government would intervene when there are massive protests going on. Once again, stopping traffic, stopping the flow of work in the downtown core. I know that certain streets were basically shut down for protests. That tens of thousands of people had gathered. They're raising Palestinian flags. There's protesting going on both sides, but especially, at least so far as the news is projected to us, lots of Palestinian protesters with flags risen and microphones in the streets, loudspeakers, and I could see how that would be completely intimidating and divisive with all the groups in the city, especially with the Jewish demographic. Um, I haven't been downtown in a while, so I can't
Hmm.
say that I've seen it firsthand, but I've seen I follow a lot of channels and podcasts that are taking a ground look at this, and yeah, the divide is like as blatant as it could possibly be. It took something like this to really just
But it's a very
I,
not un-Canadian thing as well, isn't it? Like that
completely.
free
Oh,
Palestine movement is a completely non-Canadian feeling.
well, it lends itself to what you said earlier about how people they'll immigrate here and just retain every aspect of their identity
Yeah.
from where they'd come from,
Yeah.
and have zero.
Loyalty.
I go so far as to say even respect, yeah, loyalty, respect, consideration for the
Hmm.
other people in the country. I actually had a brief period of time where I'd worked as during my student days at university. I was a student intern at the Immigration and Refugee Board downtown, and I their process was extremely tight. They had people on a 2-year wait list for appeals to immigrate into the country, and I felt that they were doing a very decent job of vetting people who'd be allowed in. Now it seems the case that if you claim refugee status from virtually anywhere, you're ushered in on a red carpet, and
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of people are entering, and it's causing everything we've just discussed:
Yeah.
housing crisis, cost, the standard of living is decreasing. There's
But you see,
racial
the
divide,
thing is,
ethnic
like,
divide.
when you have put that in your constitution since 1982, that um, the section 27 of whatever, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that it is for the preservation and enhancement of the
Yeah.
multicultural heritage, right?
Mhm.
So I just don't understand what they thought at that time, that it would not reduce, or it would not completely annihilate the actual national Canadian culture,
Yeah.
because you can't maintain a national Canadian culture. So are there parts of Canada which are uh, more conservative and are like sort of, you know where immigrants don't go as well, or is it like mostly like in Britain as well, non-city areas where they are like, people are moving out of the cities and they're just going to those areas now?
That's a really interesting question, and I'll give you an interesting answer to that. So obviously, the major cities are congregation hubs for immigrants. Of course, this is where the
Hmm.
opportunities are, where families might have established themselves prior. Now, you'd think that outside the major city areas, those zones would be more conservative, and for the most part, I'd argue they are. The further north you go, but even traveling 40 minutes outside the radius of any major city, you're going to find mosques built,
Hmm.
mosques, temples. I've seen it, and it makes me wonder. It's just kind of bizarre, but obviously the land is cheaper.
Yeah.
It's easier, possibly to purchase land in those areas. But if there is going to be expansion, it's already happening. It's because people are starting to spread out beyond the city
Mm.
regions into the countryside. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is. What do you think your own perspective is like? How you see yourself in the future? Do you see yourself fighting it out within Canada, or are you despondent enough to say, like, you know what, I'm not doing enough business because people don't have enough money over here, or they are not spending on that, or I'm not of diverse background for people to be spending on me, you
Hmm.
know, that sort of feeling. um that doesn't reduce your Canadianness. It's sort of
Sure.
like it's a necessity sort of thing. Are
Sure.
you thinking of what others are thinking as well, not just like, oh, going to Canada, but maybe,
Yeah.
going to the Asia Pacific areas, Singapore and those areas for a while, and like, sort of say, my country has lost its way, but I am still Canadian. I'm gonna keep that Canadianness in me, but for a while I need to make a living, because we are both of that age in our, like,
Hmm.
off, like, a past 35, where
True.
we have to think about like the next 20, 30 years of our life,
Precisely.
having, trying to make the most impact that we can in those 20, 30 years, and we can't be, muddled up with things,
Oh yeah.
you know
No. Yeah, it's a great question. Honestly, yes, economically, it's proving to be an extreme challenge here. And this is across the board. I've got friends that are making six figures. They're feeling the crunch. And
mm,
you'd think, six
six
figures is now
figures.
the basic, the six figures is the new 40, 50,000 a year. It's really become
It's
that
ridiculous.
after it's out
Ridiculous.
of control.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot to earn that much money. You've got to be an expert in your field. You've got to have the credentials. You got to have the experience. Nobody's coming out of the gate making 100,000
Yeah.
unless you're a doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Even then, you have to earn your way up. And I know for a fact that they pay less here than they do in the States. So the incentive to work here, the incentive is to get an education here.
And then use
It's
that to
better.
go up.
That's it.
But then
That's it.
again, like, even the education, the quality of education is going down so much. Do you really want, to be educated over here, or would you rather
Yeah,
be educated, like, yeah, I would even
I
say,
know.
like, people would be better off getting business education in
Yeah,
India
sure,
than any other countries, because they are real over there with their
sure.
businesses and
Yeah,
stuff. But this is what I'm seeing is how people are not going to have families and stuff, you know, because they are at our age and they're still not
yeah.
secure.
It's unfeasible.
Whereas before 10 years ago, even doing a minimal job, would have secured us, you know.
Totally, totally.
So this is a problem. Like, I've been talking to my wife as well. What are we thinking? What are we doing? You know, is this sustainable for us? Um, Neither of us, like, are in the mood to spend most of our lives, doing something that, or living it out, hand to hand, mouth to mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that's not doable. You know, so yeah, that's why I'm thinking as well. Like, are most Canadians in that boat? Are they thinking like, I can't do it anymore, or will we see a more bigger exodus, or people staying to fight after the next elections?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I see. It seems to be the case that people that are better off are more willing to leave. People that are coming
That's
in
interesting.
that are used to a lesser standard of living are just accepting it. That
Mm,
seems to be the case. And I
yeah,
think the country's actually counting on that
yeah,
because I've never communal living isn't something it's something you do in college for like 2 or 3 years.
yeah.
You're not living
No,
five to a room with
yeah,
strangers. That's not
no,
acceptable. That's not even appropriate in my
no,
opinion.
no.
That's not how anybody here has lived in the last 20, 30 years, but it's starting to become an acceptable norm. The government's turning a blind eye to just the way these landlords are, divvying up their space within their homes. I understand they're trying to pay their mortgage. I completely get that, but you can't have, they're charging maybe $300-400
Yeah,
a person for the space of a bed. That's it.
yeah,
You get a bed space, you have zero privacy.
yeah. But
Um,
like, back 100, 200 or something years ago within Britain, probably 100 years before as well. That's how people were living in London, right?
Sure.
So,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
That
but
makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, we improved, but we haven't improved for
Mm.
ourselves. It seems like we have improved for other people, and people who are more ambitious, people who have more, more to give, are going to start, seeking other routes, because there's so much to change. But that
Yeah.
also sort of leans to that other feeling of mine, that is probably a bit selfish, that we are not staying and we are not fighting,
Right.
and we leaving those who can't, who are stuck geographically because of their situation, because of how much they have, they earn, because of their background or whatever. They're stuck in our countries geographically, and we just leaving them to fight for themselves,
Right.
which, it's that feeling that is stuck. And it's not greed. People might think, oh, you want to go, like, so you can have a nice life. Everyone wants a nice life, right? That's why other people are coming into our countries. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
precisely the
You're right.
point,
You're
right?
right.
Like, they're coming over here.
I haven't complete. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, no, but that's what I was saying. Like, it's not greed. It's not as if like we want more money, because you and I are both in that same boat. It's not
Sure.
like really the money. It's like, it's
Mhm.
more of the freedom and
Yeah.
the ability to engage in your ambitions
Hmm.
with as
Hmm.
less restriction as possible.
Yeah.
It can't be greed all the time, but it can be as well. Why not? A person can want to earn as much as possible if they're able to do it. you know
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Going back to your question a bit earlier, I'm at an interesting crossroads myself where I'm deciding, I don't think Canada's a lost cause. I do
Hmm.
see a bright future in certain areas. I mean, the population's expanding. I'm in the field of education with my day job, so I see huge potential there for growth. I'm not I'm qualified to teach overseas. I do my teaching remotely. I'd have to go back qualified to teach as an official teacher here,
Hmm.
but I've heard that they're in desperate need of teachers here, and I understand. It makes sense. And I've spoken to a woman who is a teacher here recently, and she said that in the last couple of years they have been in dire need, and they're willing to pay top dollar for teachers who are qualified. So there opportunities still exist in certain
Yeah,
fields
but
in
it's a cultural
education.
problem, isn't it? Because they need more teachers, but they need teachers to be compliant to their work ideology. So,
That's an
you
well,
know,
I
so
mean,
like,
yeah,
there
yeah.
might be more teachers needed in Canada, but like, are you
Am I willing
people
to
who,
toe the status line, right? I know, or the party
th-
line. Yeah.
yeah, that's the thing. Like, and if you want to further your teaching and whatever, you can't do it within schools in Canada, because how long are you gonna go on with their BS, right? So
Hmm.
let's say if someone like you wanted to, like, no, I really want to teach, I like teaching and stuff, and then you get an opportunity somewhere, like, let's say in Vietnam, you know,
Sure.
exciting, completely different culture, like, for the next 10 years or something like that. And there's nothing of this, or hopefully there's nothing of this nonsense going on
Right.
in those Asia Pacific countries that much,
Yeah. Oh,
right?
it's true. Yeah, it's
So,
not going on there. No.
weighing those things up, people
Yeah.
are, this is what I fear people are going to do. There already is a lot of brain drain, and I
Hmm.
think so Canada is going to feel that a lot
If it
more.
isn't already. Oh, a lot more,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah,
Certainly.
but
Yeah.
I don't know what then becomes of Canada afterwards. Does it just become a homogeneous blob of like nothingness, and just like, a huge refugee center that Britain is becoming itself?
I have I have sincerely thought that that is the direction they're intending for it to go. I considering what I've seen around me, the way I've
Mm.
seen the country shift in the last half decade, that's what I see. It sounds brutal, but that's just it. I mean,
But
yeah,
then,
yeah.
like, is there a way that Canada breaks up in certain, provinces and stuff like that? Is there a push between people with, like, okay, we are not going down that route. We're gonna, you know, go into
Seems to be the
America or
case
something
with
like.
yeah, it seems to be the case with Quebec and Alberta specifically. They seem to be highly independent and retaining some of
Quebec
their
is having
yeah,
that issue because of them being francophile, right? So
yeah.
people
Yeah,
are not, they cannot, their culture is not being maintained, because immigrants who are coming in are not learning French or the French way, you know.
it's true. They've always been exclusionary,
Hmm.
largely to do with the language. I know that I was even considering moving there to find a place to
Hmm.
live. Um, And I'd spoken with some friends, and they'd said that knowing the language will do you well. So being fluent
Mm,
in French is, it's not. But now people are just moving anywhere they can
yeah,
find a place to live.
yeah,
It's gone to that point. I made a tweet the other day, just kind of on a whim, saying what the country needs immediately is 10 million homes and a rent cap on each of those units. Like we
yeah,
need it, and the government's doing whatever it's doing. Like it's I feel like the prime minister's mocking people when he says, "Oh, we've invested $500 million in 3,000 more homes."
yeah.
Like you just let in 10,000 people yesterday.
Yeah. And
We need
the problem is
like
like when you have such low drip of homes, new homes making as well, the price, the cost of the homes remains at that or goes up, right?
yeah,
If
that's
you
right.
have a lot of homes at the same time, then they like, the demand and supply might
That's it.
bring the price down. But yeah,
That's right. It's the deficit of homes, the deficit of availability that causes the price to
yeah,
shoot up. And
yeah,
the population is just ever increasing. It every year I go to, you can tell around Christmas time, not even those peak holiday moments, but I was in the mall the other day and it was just packed, just
yeah,
completely packed, and during daytime hours too. So it's it
yeah,
was never like that. It was
yeah.
never like that from when I remember.
All right. So I hope we're going to end this now. We have been
Sure.
talking for a very long time. The short conversation became a very long conversation because I think so. Britain has sort of like the same frustrations as Canada right now, and a lot of people are feeling these frustrations as we both are. I hope that the next election is the turning point. What's happened in Argentina yesterday might be
Yeah.
an indicator of where people are mentally going. Like they've had enough. They know the left side of politics is bringing them down. It's time for a change. I think so. If change doesn't happen, then we are going to see once in a lifetime sort of exodus of people, the migration, reverse migration of people away from the west towards the east, sort of a thing, and
Oh,
people
yeah.
would disperse themselves where necessary.
True.
But yeah, let's hope. Let's
Indeed.
hope
Absolutely.
Canada, yeah, retains itself somehow because it is an integral part of the West. You know.
Yeah. It's a beautiful country. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm grateful to live here. I really am. I still am.
yeah,
Despite all the political chaos, it's still a beautiful place. So
yeah,
I don't want to leave.
yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we've talked a lot about Canada, as I said. But I think so. It's important to have these conversations on not even like on expert levels because neither of us are experts in what the problems are happening, but on common people, like regular people level that we're having, because it gives people perspective that it's not just Canadian problem in Canada. It gives that perspective to Canadians. It gives the perspective to the Brits that it's not just their problem in Britain, and so on and so on. Similar countries are having similar problems. So also gives us hope that we all have the same kind of solutions ahead of us. So it's sort of like a domino effect. If one country does that, it might help other countries as well to make that decision, because then you can see it's possible. And I think so the only possible way is for countries to go more conservative on their on their politicians for a while, and not just like conservative sounding. It's like in Britain, doesn't just mean like go for the conservative party because there's hardly any conservatives over there, but go for actual party that want to take those conservative steps. So something that I usually say is like recently, that most of our systems are liberal, all of our systems are liberal, but the actions that we need to take currently are conservative. That's why we need both of them, both the liberals and conservative pulling together. So hopefully what we have seen is, yeah, Canada has a lot of problems going on. you know People are struggling in that way, but obviously not all people. Other people have other roots. People who have enough, they might be able to sustain themselves over this period. and it will give other people who haven't been doing too well this time to reevaluate their life choices as well. Because life is not a carnival. The carnival has actually ended now. So just for people to put proper basis in, for people like like yourself as well, to see like, okay, you know maybe renting all the time is not effective, right? That
Correct.
once the carnival ends, then the renting problem comes in. So maybe owning houses is actually important and stuff. These are the lessons hopefully people can reach to themselves. Over compassion, misplaced compassion is not a good idea. That's why this state sponsored murder that has led to is not a good idea as well. It can lead, hopefully it leads Canadians to think like maybe our indulgence in woke ideology isn't all that good, because
Mm-hmm.
it is destroying us in that sense that we cannot critically think. We want to be multicultural, but up to what point?
Mm-hmm.
you know uh, Maybe perhaps it's a good idea to exclude that from the constitution, to amend that from the constitution, that a country's objective should not be to enhance multiculturalism. It should be to enhance and maintain its national culture. you know so those are the hopefully the things that people can see that are playing out. And it's not you're not racist for pointing those things out. Be brave enough to be able to point it out and exactly where
Mm-hmm.
those problems are happening, and hopefully something good happens. If not, like we said before, then we are going to see a massive exodus
Oh yeah.
of people going out of the countries like Canada, or it could be just Canada to America, because in America you're more isolated state to state. But it could be like completely away from the Western countries. People who are able to do it is already happening. People, most notable people are taking that plunge. So yeah, we're going to end this now, and just tell people where they can find you once again.
Yeah, thanks. You can find me at Drawn by Bond. That's my Twitter handle. And www.drawnbybond.com is my website. And yes, same handle for Instagram. But you'll find me mostly on Twitter. And you'll find me conversing with Momus here on his podcast. So stay tuned, friends.
All right, brilliant. Okay, we're gonna say goodbye now. Thank you everyone for listening. Take care. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.